Hello to everybody. So it's a pleasure to be here with you discussing a very important issue that is becoming more and more important, that is the impacts of climate change and the build-up of a new society that is absolutely necessary for for the status that we have right now in our planet. So basically, I think it's important to understand that climate change is only one of the many grand challenges we are having right now. And the other challenges are provide energy for all, especially clean energy. We have to deal with biodiversity loss, in addition to climate change, the impacts of artificial intelligence. The issue of urban air pollution is still a very important issue in developing countries, and more recently also the issue of build-up of peace in our sustainable planet. And basically, the main question is how science could help humanity to go beyond these grand challenges. So that's a very important issue for science and for the society itself. If you look a little bit of history, we know that the Stockholm United Nations Conference on the Human Environment, it happened in 1972. So it was 50 years ago. So basically, it's 50 years that science make an alert for the society, government, enterprises that the path you are choosing is not sustainable. And 2023 was a year with a lot of different climate extremes events that make the society understand fully what is the new climate that greenhouse gas emissions are bringing to us. On the right here, we see the global temperature change from 1880 to 2021, and then we see the very steep increase in global temperature from 1980 up to now, where we observe that the planet is heating up at a very high rate. And then the reason for that is that the global emissions of greenhouse gases are continuing to rise, respective of the Paris Agreement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but is still observing an increase between 2 and 4% in greenhouse gas emissions. These greenhouse gas emissions bring the concentration of CO2, methane, and N2O on a steadily increase. And in terms of CO2, the concentrations of CO2 today are 66% higher than they were in the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And from the total emissions right now, 17% of the total emissions are associated with deforestation of tropical forest and 83% to the fossil fuel emissions. And these emissions and these changes in concentrations are making important changes in the climate of our planet. On the left here, we see the average global temperature over the last 2,000 years, and this is where we are. And basically in 2023, we have the highest temperature observed in the last 125,000 years. So it's a huge increase in temperature. On the right, you see basically that even if you look for the last 50 years, you see a steadily increase in temperature. So this will have a very important impact in the society, in the ecosystems, and in the overall economic situation for the whole planet. And what about the future? The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, shows that if you continue to follow the track you are having right now, increasing temperature can be about 4.3 degrees. If you implement the Paris Agreement like you are having implementing right now, about 3.5 degrees, Or if you be more strict, we can have an increase in temperature of about 2.8 degrees Celsius. So basically, it's impossible right now with the emissions we have and the emissions we have had in the past to achieve 1.5 or even 2 degrees in terms of global average increase in temperature compared to the Industrial Revolution. And this increase in temperature is not homogeneous all over the planet. This is the simulation change in the temperature, the geographical distribution of it. If you have a 4 degrees global warming overall for the planet, continents like South America can have an increase in between 5 to 5.5 degrees, and in the Arctic region, Canada, and also in Siberia, can have an increase in temperature in between 6 to 6.5 degrees. This will have a tremendous impact in the ecosystem in this region. Also, we observe and we are observing large changes in precipitation pattern. And if you allow the planet to heat up by 4 degrees, basically Amazonia, northeast part of Brazil and central South America will be much drier than they are today. The same with South Africa, Mediterranean, Europe, and Central America. So you see that this will have important impacts in one critical ingredient of the food production in our planet, that is soil humidity. So soil humidity for most of the South America will be decreased significantly, as well as Central America and the central part of the United States, as well as all the Mediterranean Europe region and the southern tip of Africa. So you can see that this will make food production more difficult, and this was recognized by the World Economic Forum, where in the Global Risk 2016 report, they show the impacts on food yield in a 3 degrees hotter planet. You see that South America will have a very important decrease in the production of food, as well as most of the tropical regions. So this, of course, will increase the inequalities in our planet, and this, of course, will increase the geopolitical tensions in an already tension planet. The other important aspect is the very fast increase in extreme weather events, both in Europe with very, very strong rains in Germany in 2021. We saw, for instance, a large amount of fires in France, fires in Spain and Portugal. We see 52 degrees in California, and we also see the drought in Amazonian basin is the largest one in at least the last 100 years. And 2023 was a very special year in terms of global climate, where you see that the envelope of the climate from 1979 to 2020 are on this particular envelope here, you see 2023 well above the record of temperature. So something is really happening with the temperature in the atmosphere, as well as this plot here show the sea surface temperature in June 2001. And this is, you see how in the oceans are becoming much, much hotter. And this, of course, is important for the El Nino. And the possible changes in climate extremes is that one event that was happening once every 50 years before the Industrial Revolution, in a 4 degrees warmer planet, will be 39 times more frequent and will be 5 times more intense. So basically, we'll see a very, very important impact from climate extremes. And talking on Amazonia, Amazonia is important for the global climate because deforestation in Amazonia feeds greenhouse gases that are aggravating the global climate, but on the other side, the increase in temperature caused mostly by emissions of fossil fuel are degrading the tropical forest, making the forest a source of carbon instead of a sink. And the problem with this is that the Amazonia has 120 billion tons of carbon that is equivalent of 10 years of fossil fuel emissions that are starting to be released to the atmosphere, that has the potential to be a very strong positive feedback to the global system. And then going to the end of my talk, I think it's important to understand that we are here in 2023 and you have the possibility to build up a society with low emissions of greenhouse gases. We can have a low climate risk. We can achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And this can be the way to build up a sustainable society in our planet. Or the second alternative is to allow the planet to heat up by 4 degrees with the high emission of greenhouse gases, and we can transpass the limits for adaptation. We'll have a very large increase in climate risk that will affect every single human being and all the life in our planet. And it's important to understand that the ones who was born in 1950s, basically they have 70 years old in 2020, but who was born in 2008 will have 70 years old in 2050, and who is born in now, we have 70 years old in 2090. So there is a very important generation issue with the population that even will be born in the next year, where they will have a much worse climate structure than we had during our lifetime. And then I think it's important to explicit the several inconvenient truths that we have in our planet. First, it's impossible now to limit warming to 2 degrees. We are heading to a warming of about 2.7 to 3.2 degrees over this century. When this will happen will depend on how much we can or cannot reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. There is no possibility of reaching net zero on the planet in 2050. This is very, very clear, because basically the production of food is responsible for 25% of our emissions, and this will be very hard to mitigate. We will extinct, because of the biodiversity loss, thousands of species over the course of this century. And producing food for 10 billion people in the new climate will be very challenges in the future. And then the geopolitical issue will make the mass migrations strong, with increasing geopolitical tensions. And the solution for that is to fulfill the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that I think are the key for us to build up a new society that can respect the limits of our planet in terms of natural resources, but as well as to indicate the need to eradicate poverty. We needed to provide food to every single human being on this planet, and so on. So basically, that's the way we will have to fulfill to build up a sustainable society. And climatic and environmental issues will have strong economical and social impacts, including jobs, and we will increase the socioeconomic inequalities that are already becoming important. Basically, I leave you with a picture of the new climate of our planet, and we hope to avoid this scenario and work everybody together to build up a sustainable society in the next decades. Thank you very much for your attention.